I knew something was wrong the second the woman across the street stopped pretending to water her flowers. Her hose was aimed at the same dead patch of grass for almost 10 minutes, but her eyes were locked on me. I was in my backyard, kneeling beside a little blue kiddie pool I'd bought from Walmart that morning. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just a small pool for hot afternoons. The kind you fill with a garden hose and forget about until the sun goes down. But to her, apparently I was building a crime scene. Her name was Denise Caldwell, but everyone on my street called her the clipboard lady. Not to her face, never to her face. I had moved into the neighborhood 3 months earlier. The house had belonged to an older man named Mr. Harlan, who had passed away the previous winter. His daughter sold it quickly, and I got lucky with the price because the place needed work. The backyard was uneven, the fence leaned like it was tired, and the corner of the lawn had this strange square patch where nothing grew right. That patch was exactly where I decided to set up the kiddie pool. Not because I had some grand plan, it was just the flattest spot in the yard. I had no idea that one decision would turn my quiet Saturday into the craziest thing I'd ever lived through. I was wearing an old gray shirt, black shorts, and work gloves, trying to level the ground with a rake. Dennis appeared at the fence line like she had been summoned by the sound of happiness. "Excuse me," she shouted. I looked up. "Can I help you?" She had a blonde hair sprayed stiff, a white shirt tucked into jeans, and her phone already in her hand like it was a weapon. "You can't put that there," she said. I blinked. "Put what where?" "That pool." I looked down at the small plastic pool, then back at her. "It's a kiddie pool," I said. "It's not exactly an Olympic training center." She didn't laugh. Denise told me the neighborhood had visual standards. I told her my fence was 6 feet tall and she could not even see the pool unless she was standing on her toes like she was doing right then. That made her face tighten. "I am a part of the HOA compliance committee," she said. I said, "There is no HOA." That was the first time I saw real anger flash across her face. She stepped closer to the fence. "There used to be." I shrugged. "Well, there is not one now." That was true. I checked before buying the house. No HOA, no monthly fees, no rules about kiddie pools, lawn chairs, flower pots, or anything. Denise hated that answer. She started recording me, not casually either. She held her phone high, zoomed in, and spoke like a news reporter covering a national emergency. "This man is refusing to follow neighborhood safety standards," she said. I laughed because I thought she was joking. That was a mistake. Her eye snapped towards me. "You think this is funny? I think you are filming me filling up a children's pool in my own backyard." She pointed at the dead square of grass beneath it. "That area is restricted." That caught my attention. Restricted by who? She looked like she realized she'd said too much. Then she lifted her phone higher and said, "I'm calling the police." I thought she was bluffing. She wasn't. 10 minutes later, two officers walked through my gate, and Lana let them in. One of them looked embarrassed before he even spoke. "Sir, we got a call about an unauthorized structure and possibly property damage." I looked at the blue kiddie pool, which was halfway filled with water and had cartoon fish on the side. "Unauthorized structure," I said. The younger officer pressed his lips together like he was trying not to smile. Denise stood behind them, arms crossed, looking victorious. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "He's disturbing protected ground." The older officer turned to her. "Protected ground?" Denise went pale. The officer asked what she meant by protected ground. Denise immediately changed direction. "I meant protected neighborhood property," I said. "This is my backyard." She snapped, "Only because you bought it without understanding its history." That got quiet fast. The officers looked at me, then at Denise. I asked, "What history?" She told me I needed to stop digging, stop moving dirt, and stop filling the pool until the matter was reviewed. That made no sense. I was not digging a basement. I had scrapped maybe 2 inches of soil to level a plastic pool. The way she kept staring at the dead square made me wonder if she was actually not worried about the pool. She was worried about what was under it. The police left after confirming I was not breaking any law. Denise was furious. Before leaving, the older officer told her, "Ma'am, please do not call 911 over a backyard pool again." She gave him a fake smile and said, "Of course." Then she looked at me and whispered, "You have no idea what you're stepping into." That should have been the end of it, but I could not stop thinking about what she said. Protected ground, restricted area, the history of the property. So I did what any normal person would do after a nosy neighbor accidentally made herself sound guilty. I went inside, opened my laptop, and searched the house's address. At first, I found normal stuff: old real estate listing, tax records, a few blurry photos from when Mr. Harlan owned the place. Then I found a neighborhood forum from almost 8 years ago. Most of the posts were boring: lawn complaints, lost cats, garbage pickup delays, but one thread had my address in the title. Question about Harlan Property Fund. I clicked it. The comments were messy, but I understood enough. Years ago, some neighbors had raised money to build a small community playground behind Mr. Harlan's house. They claimed he had agreed to sell a strip of land for it. The playground was never built, the money disappeared, and guess who had managed the fund? Denise Caldwell. Now I was interested. I kept digging online. The playground fund had collected over $18,000 from families in the neighborhood. There were bake sales, raffles, donation jars, and even a GoFundMe. Then suddenly the plan died. Denise posted that the land deal fell through because Mr. Harlan became difficult. After that, she told everyone the remaining money went towards legal and planning expenses. Nobody seemed to know what that meant. One comment stood out. It was from Mr. Harlan's daughter. My father never agreed to sell land. Denise kept pressuring him. He told her no several times. That gave me chills, because that dead patch in my yard was right where the playground was supposed to go. The next morning, Denise had three neighbors standing with her across the street. They were all looking towards my house. When I came outside, she lifted her chin like she was ready for court. One man named Greg walked over and said, "Hey, I do not want problems, but Denise says that land is disputed." I said, "My backyard?" He looked uncomfortable. She said part of it was promised to the neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and showed him the property survey. Greg looked back at Denise. Her face hardened. That was when I realized she was not trying to stop a kiddie pool. She was trying to protect an old lie. I called Mr. Harlan's daughter, Elise. Her number was still in my closing paperwork because she had handled the sale. I asked her carefully about the playground fund. There was a long pause. Then she said Denise is still talking about that. I told her what happened. Elise sighed. My father kept a folder. He said Denise was obsessed with getting that back corner of the yard. He thought something was wrong with the donation money, but he got sick before he could do anything. Then she said something that made me sit up. There might still be a metal lockbox buried near that patch. Dad used to hide documents outside because he did not trust people coming into the house. I looked out the window at the kiddie pool, right over the dead grass. I didn't dig right away. I bought a cheap metal detector first. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I buried a lockbox in my own yard because of a kiddie pool fight. It sounded like something from a bad mystery show. But when I waved the detector over the dead square, it beeped almost immediately. My stomach dropped. I moved the kiddie pool aside, drained half the water, and started scraping around the ground carefully. About 6 inches down, my shovel hit metal. It wasn't big, just a rusted flat lockbox wrapped in a black trash bag, and inside were papers, old receipts, printed emails, and even a small flash drive sealed in a plastic sleeve. Denise had every reason to panic. I called Elise before opening anything else. She came over that evening with her husband, but when she saw the lockbox, she started crying. She recognized it immediately. "My dad said he had proof," she whispered. "I thought he was confused near the end." The papers were not random. They were copies of checks, donation records, handwritten notes, and printed messages between Denise and a contractor. The contractor had quoted a playground design, but the project was never approved. Then there were withdrawals, large ones, labeled as consulting, planning, urgent review, and permit support. The weird part, some checks were written to a company registered to Denise's sister. We did not post anything online. That would have been satisfying, but stupid. Elise took pictures of everything and contacted an attorney. I gave her the flash drive and the paper, but kept copies in case Denise tried something. She did. The next morning, there was a city inspector at my door. Denise had filed a complaint saying I was installing an illegal pool, altering drainage, damaging shared land, and creating a mosquito hazard. The inspector looked at the kiddie pool, then he looked at me. "This is the pool?" "Yes." He rubbed his forehead. Denise appeared behind him with the same smug smile before. Then Elise pulled into my driveway with her attorney. Denise's smile disappeared. The attorney did not yell. That was the scary part. He calmly told Denise that false emergency calls, harassment, and knowingly interfering with private property could create legal problems. Denise tried to laugh it off. Then he mentioned the playground fund. Her entire face changed. She said, "That has nothing to do with him." I said, "Then why did you call 911 over where I placed a kiddie pool?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. The inspector asked, "What playground fund?" Denise snapped, "This is private neighborhood business." Elise stepped forward and said no, it was money collected from families, including mine. A few neighbors had gathered by then. For once, Denise had no audience control. The truth came out slowly over the next few weeks. It turned out Denise had built her entire little neighborhood power trip on that failed playground project. For years, she told people Mr. Harlan ruined everything by backing out. People believed her, some even resented him, but the documents showed Mr. Harlan never agreed to sell the land. Denise had collected money anyway. She was hoping she could pressure him later. When he refused, she started moving the money around and around, blaming him publicly. That dead patch in my yard was not protected. It was where Mr. Harlan had once planted flowers. Denise kept killing them with weed spray from over the fence, because she hated seeing him enjoy land she thought she could never have. The conclusion was not some movie scene where Denise got dragged away in handcuffs while everyone clapped. It was better. She lost the thing she cared about the most, control. The families who donated money filed a civil claim. Elise added defamation claims over the things Denise had said about her father. The city warned Denise about repeated false complaints. The police department flagged her address for non-emergency misuse after reviewing the 911 call. Then the neighborhood organized a real meeting. No fake HOA, no clipboard committees, just homeowners in folding chairs at Greg's driveway. Denise showed up expecting to defend herself. Instead, everyone voted to create a voluntary neighborhood fund with three-person oversight, public records, and no single person in charge. Denise wasn't nominated. A month later, I finally set up the kiddie pool again. Same spots, same blue plastic sides, same garden hose. Only this time, half the neighborhood came over with lawn chairs and lemonade like it was a block party. Elise came too, and she brought a small framed photo of her father and placed it on the patio table. She told everyone the truth about him, not as a stubborn old man Denise described, but as someone who had protected his home, kept records, and refused to be bullied. The funniest part, Greg brought us a little sign and stuck it beside the pool. It said, "Historic landmark, the pool that ended the clipboard era." I laughed so hard I almost dropped the hose. Denise still lives across the street. She does not talk to me anymore. Sometimes I see her watching from behind her curtains, but the clipboard is gone. That fake authority is gone. The crowd around her is gone. And now every summer, I set up that kiddie pool in the exact same place, not because I need it, not even because it was comfortable. I set it there because it reminds me how close I came to letting a loud person scare me away from my own property. She called 911 because of a kiddie pool, but what she really did was point everyone straight towards the secret she had spent years trying to bury.